the plant trick professionals use that most gardeners ignore. I've spent 25 years working alongside commercial growers, running greenhouses and nurseries, moving thousands of seedlings outside every season. In all that time, I've seen transplants shock maybe 5 times. Almost every home gardener knows this scene. A pepper seedling, 6 weeks old, thick stem, dark green, perfect on the windowsill, moved outside. Within 48 hours the leaves curl. The color fades to a sickly gray-green. Growth stops. Most gardeners blame themselves: bad soil, not enough water, a late frost, and replant. Same result. Here's the difference. Professional growers do one thing before a seedling ever touches garden soil. It isn't a fertilizer. It isn't a special soil mix. It costs almost nothing. Most home gardeners have never heard of it. Seed packets don't mention it. Garden centers don't bring it up at the register. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what that step is, and the 4 mistakes that cancel it out, even when you do everything right. This isn't folklore, it's documented, measured horticulture. At Cornell University, horticulture professor Steve Rieners has spent years tracking what happens inside a plant the moment it moves from a protected environment into open soil: pores closing, growth slowing, leaves paling. This isn't a blog opinion. It's a university research program built to get this right. Across the Atlantic, the Royal Horticultural Society, Britain's oldest, most respected gardening authority, has studied the same problem for decades. Their finding: gradually acclimatizing indoor-raised plants to outdoor conditions toughens them up and prevents stunted growth. Skip that step, and the shock can severely stunt the plant. The toughening process changes the plant at a structural level: thicker leaves, more waxiness, sturdier growth, even though it's slower than in a greenhouse. That's not a tip. That's a measurable, physical transformation happening inside the plant's own cells. This isn't academic theory either. Commercial growers built it into their daily routine. They plan backward from the outdoor planting date, starting acclimation roughly 2 weeks out, gradually increasing outdoor hours until the plant can handle a full day and night. It's not a hack. It's routine, built into nursery operations the same way watering is. Garden writers trained under professional growers say the same thing. Any plant raised in a protected environment benefits from this toughening. Even the hardy plants people assume don't need it. That gives this method something few garden tricks have: a university program behind the science, and an entire industry quietly relying on it every season. Cornell studies why it works. The RHS measures how it changes the plant. Nurseries from Britain to upstate New York build their planting calendars around it. None of it comes from a marketing department. None of it requires buying anything. It's the difference between how professionals treat a plant in its last 2 weeks indoors and how most home gardeners treat that same plant, which, as you're about to see, is usually not at all. Here's what's coming. This isn't about one trick. It's the entire sequence professional growers follow in the 2 weeks before a plant touches garden soil, a sequence most backyard gardeners only do one piece of, if any. We'll cover how nurseries toughen up a seedling so it survives its first brutal week outdoors. We'll get into a microscopic partnership happening underground that most gardeners have never heard of, one that lets a plant's roots reach for water and nutrients far beyond what the roots alone could touch. We'll look at why a fertilizer's form, liquid or granular, can be the difference between a plant that recovers in days and one that sits stunted for a month. And we'll get into something professional growers do with their hands, right at the moment of planting, that almost no home gardening guide mentions. But here's the part that matters more than any step on that list. Even a gardener who does everything right, hardens off properly, times the transplant well, picks the right fertilizer, can still watch a plant struggle. Because there's one mistake, one habit so common it shows up in almost every backyard garden in the country, that cancels out everything else on this list. It happens in the first 30 seconds of planting. Most gardeners do it without realizing it's a mistake. And until it's fixed, none of these other tricks can do their full job. That mistake hasn't been revealed yet. It's coming. But once it is, the rest of this video makes a lot more sense, because every method from here on works better, or in some cases only works at all, once that one habit is gone. 5 professional methods, 1 hidden mistake undoing all of them. Let's start with the one almost every gardener gets backward. Method 1. Mycorrhizal fungi. What if a plant's roots, the part everyone assumes does all the feeding, were only ever doing a fraction of the job? That sounds backward. It isn't. Roots reach only what's directly around them. But for most plants on Earth, roots are never working alone. More than 85% of plant species, including nearly every major agricultural and horticultural crop, partner with a group of soil fungi that's done this job for 400 million years. It's called mycorrhizal symbiosis. Without it, today's crop plants probably wouldn't exist, and life on land, as we know it, might never have happened. Here's how it works. The fungus sends out thread-like filaments, hyphae, into the soil far beyond where the plant's own roots can reach. That mycelial network doesn't just expand the root's reach, it breaks into soil particles holding nutrients the plant could never access alone. In exchange, the plant feeds the fungus a share of the sugars it makes through photosynthesis. It's a trade, not a gift, one of the oldest trades in the history of life on land. The results, measured in research trials, aren't subtle. Across multiple studies, partnered plants showed 49% more growth, phosphorus uptake up 86%, nitrogen up 35%, potassium up 46%. One rice study found the partnership roughly doubled potassium uptake. Here's where most home gardeners go wrong, without realizing it. Garden centers sell bags of enriched potting soil, packed with synthetic fertilizer, designed to make seedlings look lush on the shelf. That fertilizer does something destructive. A plant fed easy, abundant nutrients has no reason to invest sugar in a fungal partner, so the partnership it's relied on for hundreds of millions of years never forms. The seedling looks perfect in the pot. Transplanted into garden soil without that network in place, it's suddenly working with a fraction of the root reach it should have. The fix is almost absurdly simple. A pinch of mycorrhizal inoculant fungal spores, sold cheap at any nursery, dusted onto the root ball at planting. Within days, the fungus begins colonizing the roots. Within weeks, that plant is pulling water and minerals from a radius of soil its own roots could never have touched. But feeding the roots is only half the story. The next method changes what's happening above the soil entirely. Method 2. Liquid vs. granular fertilizer. 2 bags of fertilizer sit on a shelf. Same nutrients, same percentages on the label. One's a fine powder meant to dissolve in water, the other's dry pellets meant to scatter on soil. Why would a struggling plant care which one gets used? Turns out, the form matters almost as much as the nutrients. Liquid fertilizer is already dissolved, immediately available, reaching the root zone or leaves within hours. Granular takes a completely different road. Dry granules have to dissolve gradually in soil moisture before any nutrient becomes available at all, a process that can take days, sometimes weeks. One nursery resource puts a number on the gap. Liquid fertilizer hits absorption rates around 90%. Granular tops out closer to 50%. Half of what's in that bag does nothing for the plant. For a healthy plant that just needs steady, long-term feeding, slow granular release is a feature, not a flaw. It releases nutrients over 6 to 8 weeks, ideal for consistent feeding across a season. But for a plant that's already stressed, yellowing, or sitting in transplant shock, 6 to 8 weeks might as well be forever. That plant doesn't need a slow drip, it needs nutrients now. This is exactly where most home gardeners get it backward. Standing in a garden center, faced with a sick-looking tomato plant, the instinct is to reach for the big bag, the all-purpose granular fertilizer marketed for season-long feeding. It feels like more for the money. It feels thorough. It's the wrong tool for an emergency. Scattered around a struggling plant, those granules sit largely inert in the soil for days, while the plant's condition keeps sliding. Professionals reach for the opposite. Liquid fertilizer absorbs fast through both roots and leaves, visible growth and color change in as little as 2 days. Mixed at half strength and watered into the root zone, a liquid feed gives a stressed plant something pellets can't, nutrition it can use in hours, not weeks. Within 3 or 4 days, the difference is visible in new leaf color, firmer stems. Granular still has its place, once the plant has stabilized, as the long-term foundation for the rest of the season. But for the first rescue, speed wins. Feeding the plant fast solves one problem, but there's a second mistake hiding underneath all of this, one that has nothing to do with what's in the fertilizer at all. Method 3. Root washing. What if the soil a plant comes home in is the very thing standing between it and a healthy life? For decades, gardeners were told one rule above all: never disturb the roots. Pop the plant out of its pot, set the whole root ball in the hole, leave it alone. That advice got drilled into generations of gardeners. Now the same horticultural science that taught it is quietly overturning it. The problem starts at the nursery. Container-grown plants spend months, sometimes years, in a potting mix engineered to drain fast so roots in a confined pot don't rot. That mix is nothing like garden soil. Drop that plant straight into dense native soil, and the texture mismatch actively hurts root establishment. Worse, roots confined in a round pot too long don't grow outward. They run in circles, girdling themselves. Planted as is, those roots keep circling forever instead of pushing into the surrounding soil. This is the moment Washington State University horticulturist Linda Chalker Scott and other researchers identified. Root washing, removing the potting soil entirely and inspecting the bare roots, removes the exact barriers blocking root establishment. The method takes minutes. Hose the root ball directly, use your fingers to work loose any stubborn clumps until the roots are bare. Then prune away any roots still circling the old root ball shape. The roots will look shorter right after, but now they'll grow into the actual soil of the new spot, instead of spiraling inside the memory of a pot that no longer exists. Here's the mistake almost every home gardener makes, completely unknowingly. They buy the healthiest-looking plant on the shelf, the one with the densest, most established root ball. That density is exactly the problem. The bigger and more filled-in that root ball looks, the more likely it's already circling on itself, quietly choking its own future. The professional fix is uncomfortable to watch the first time. Once the dirt is gone, the roots are visible enough to plant at exactly the right depth and position, something impossible to judge while they're buried in a pot of soil. Done at the right time, ideally while the plant is dormant, this one step gives a transplant the structural foundation to anchor properly and avoid the slow decline root-bound, never-corrected plants face years later. A plant with healthy roots and the right partnership underground is only half the equation. The next mistake happens entirely above the soil line, in something almost every gardener does in the first 30 seconds after planting. Method 4. The Chelsea chop. What if the fastest way to get more flowers from a plant was to cut most of them off before they ever bloomed? Sounds like sabotage. To commercial growers, it's standard practice. Nurseries trim growth back just before plants leave the nursery, a strategic move that sends out healthier, bushier, more flower-laden plants that hold up better during shipping and early planting. It even has a name, borrowed from the timing of the RHS Chelsea Flower Show in late May, when British gardeners traditionally make this cut, the Chelsea chop. Here's the biology. The terminal bud at the top of a plant's central stem produces a hormone called auxin, which flows down the stem and suppresses growth of the side shoots below. The top of the plant is chemically bullying the rest of it into staying small. Cut off that top growth, and the auxin stops flowing. Get the timing right, and the plant pushes out bushy side growth, plus flower buds that wouldn't have formed otherwise. The numbers back it up. Remove the main growing tip, and the plant produces new side shoots lower down the stem. Each shoot produces its own flower, effectively doubling the eventual bloom count. There's a structural payoff too. Plants that flop over in wind or rain end up with a stronger stem framework after this process. This is the step almost every home gardener skips, and the irony is, it requires the least skill of all 5. Watching a healthy plant grow tall and full of buds, the instinct is to leave it alone. Cutting it back feels like undoing the plant's hard work. It's one of those moments where the right move feels completely wrong, and that discomfort is exactly why most people never try it. The professional method takes 30 seconds with a clean pair of shears. Remove the top third of the stem while the plant is still young and actively growing. That single cut redirects the plant's energy into lateral shoots and foliage instead of one early flush of blooms, more flowers, spread over a longer season instead of one short-lived burst. Timing is the only thing that matters. Cut too early and the plant hasn't built up enough energy reserves. Cut too late and there's not enough season left for it to rebloom. Get it right and the plant looks shorter and sparser for about 2 weeks, then explodes outward into something fuller than it ever would have become on its own. 4 professional methods down, but none of them matter if the very first thing a gardener does at planting time undoes all of it. And that's exactly the mistake waiting in the 5th and final piece of this puzzle. Method 5, potting up and the root-bound trap. Here's the question this whole video has been circling. What if the biggest mistake gardeners make has nothing to do with fertilizer, fungi, roots, or pruning shears, and instead happens months before the plant ever sees garden soil? It starts with the seed starting tray. Those small plastic cells everyone uses to start tomatoes, peppers, basil indoors. The instinct is to let a seedling grow in that cell as long as possible, then move it straight into the garden once the weather turns warm. Here's why that instinct sabotages everything. A seedling's root, confined in a small amount of soil, always grows straight down as far as it can before sending out horizontal roots, a survival strategy for limited water, not the fastest way to build a strong root system. Left in that tiny cell for weeks, the root hits the bottom and starts circling, the same girdling problem from method 3, except this time it happens before the plant ever leaves its first container. The research backs this up. A survey on container size found that root-restricted seedlings, once planted in the field, often can't keep up with water loss from their leaves, even when watered carefully after transplanting. In plain terms, a plant crammed into a small cell, its whole indoor life goes into the ground already behind, no matter how well it's fed or watered afterward. This is the mistake almost every home gardener makes without realizing it. They buy a seed tray, plant the seeds, water faithfully, and never move the seedling into a bigger container before transplant day. It feels like extra, unnecessary work. New gardeners ask this constantly. If the tomato is eventually going into a 4-inch container, why not just start it there? Here's what professionals understand and most hobbyists never learn. Gradually increasing the pot size in stages forces a seedling to develop strong horizontal roots instead of one long, spindly taproot, a stronger, more resilient plant. Each potting up into a slightly bigger container is a simple but essential step. Most seedlings need it at least once, sometimes twice, before they're ready for the garden. This is the thread tying every method in this video together. The mycorrhizal partnership only thrives in roots that have room to spread. The liquid fertilizer only works as fast as the root system can absorb it. Root washing only matters if there's a healthy branching structure underneath to correct. The Chelsea chop only produces bushier growth if the root system below can support it. Every trick in this video depends on one thing, a plant that was never allowed to become root-bound in the first place. That's the mistake hiding underneath all 5 methods, except this time it's not fertilizer, it's space. All 5 of these methods look, on the surface, like they're solving 5 different problems. One deals with roots, one deals with hunger, one deals with fungi most people never see, one deals with pruning shears, one deals with the size of a plastic pot. They don't look related at all. But underneath, every one of them sits the exact same principle. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. Every method on this list works by giving a plant room for roots to spread instead of circle, room for nutrients to arrive on a schedule the plant can actually use, room for an underground partnership to take hold, room to redirect its own energy, room to grow without hitting a wall it wasn't built to survive. Professionals don't think about fertilizer, fungi, and pruning as 5 separate disciplines. They ask one question over and over at every stage of a plant's life. Is this plant being given the space it needs to become what it's capable of becoming? That's the difference between a garden center and a research greenhouse. Not a good product, not a secret chemical. The discipline of never letting a plant get boxed in physically, nutritionally, structurally, at any point along the way. So next time a plant sits in the corner of a backyard, leaves gone the color of old paper, stems sagging toward the ground, pause before reaching for the shovel. That plant probably isn't broken. It's been confined. Somewhere in its short life, it hit a wall, a root-bound cell tray, a container of fast-draining potting soil, a slow-release fertilizer when it needed a fast one, a fungal partnership that never formed. 5 small interventions, none costing more than a few dollars, are usually all it takes to remove that wall entirely. The plant was never the problem, the space it was given was. If any one of these 5 surprised you, root washing, the liquid rescue feed, mycorrhizal inoculation, the Chelsea chop, or potting up, comment which one you're trying first. Share this with the gardener who keeps losing plants and blaming bad luck or a missing green thumb. It's almost never that. The real secret professionals know isn't a secret at all. It's patience, applied at the right moment, with room to grow. Another trick the pros use and never explain. Subscribe so you're not the last to know. That's one more secret out.